Hello there, everyone. Welcome to Whisper Zone. I am your storyteller, and I'm here to guide you tonight. I know many of you use these videos to drift off to sleep, so before we begin, take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel. I'm always curious. Where are you watching from, and what time is it in your part of the world? Now, find your cozy spot and relax. The screams always start at sunset. I've worked in the Grand Canyon for 25 years, and I still can't get used to them. They bounce off the red rocks, twist through the narrow passages, and sometimes, if you listen carefully, they almost sound like words. My name is Thomas Reeves, and I'm probably the only person alive who knows what's really hiding in these canyons. Most folks just see the tourist spots, the beautiful views, the hiking trails, and the tour buses. But I know about the other parts, the dark places, the spots where people go missing and are never found again. 3 years ago, my wife Sarah disappeared in one of those places. She was the best rock climber I knew, and we were supposed to retire together, maybe open a little camping store. Now all I have left is her empty backpack, found near a cave that shouldn't have existed. I used to lead the rescue team here at the park. When climbers got stuck or hikers lost their way, I was the one they called. My team saved hundreds of lives over the years. But lately, something's different. The canyon feels wrong, like it's awake. Last week, we found 2 climbers on the north face. They looked like mummies, but they'd only been missing for 3 days. Their bodies were covered in strange crystals, and their faces were frozen in expressions of pure terror. The rangers wanted to close that section of the park, but the tourist season was just starting. Money talks, I guess, but that's not even the strangest part. The ancient Native American drawings on the canyon walls, the ones that haven't changed in thousands of years, they're different every morning. I've taken photos to prove it. One day they show people dancing. The next day, they show them running from something. The temperature readings don't make sense either. We're getting heat waves at night when it should be cold. Some spots in the canyon are hot enough to melt boot soles even when there's no sunlight. And the missing persons reports? They're piling up on my desk faster than I can read them. The other rangers think I'm crazy. They say I've been working too hard, that I'm still not over Sarah. Maybe they're right. But I've spent my whole life in these canyons. I was born in a small town just north of here, and I learned to climb before I could walk. I know every crack, every ledge, every shadow, and I know when something's not right. Tonight I'm going to find out what's happening. I've packed my old rescue gear, filled my water bottles, and left this journal in my office. If someone's reading this, it means I either found what I was looking for, or it found me first. The sun is setting now. I can hear the screams starting, again echoing through Devil's Canyon. But this time I'm going to follow them to their source. I just hope I live to tell about it. I started my investigation at dawn. The morning air was cool, normal for the canyon, but something felt off. Usually you can hear birds singing their morning songs, but today there was nothing. Just silence. My first stop was where we found those mummified climbers. I packed extra water bottles, my trusty flashlight, and my old rescue gear. Never know when you might need a rope in these parts. The hike there took about 2 hours, following a trail that tourists never see. As I got closer, the air got weirdier. It felt like walking into an oven, even though the sun wasn't high yet. My thermometer showed 95 degrees, impossible for 6 a.m. Sweat ran down my back as I checked my GPS. I've been doing this job long enough to know that the desert can play tricks on you if you're not careful. That's when I saw the first real sign that something was wrong. The rock face where we found the climbers was covered in a thin layer of crystals. They looked like ice, but when I touched them, they were hot. My hand came away red and stinging, like I'd touched a hot stove. I've seen a lot of strange things in the canyon, but never anything like this. I took some pictures and samples, putting them carefully in plastic bags. Looking up at the cliff, I noticed something else strange. The climbing anchors the victims had placed were melted. Not broken or bent, melted. Like someone had taken a blowtorch to them. As I was examining the anchors, I heard it. a sound that made my skin crawl. It started as a whisper, like someone talking very quietly just behind me. I spun around, but there was nobody there. The whisper grew louder, bouncing off the canyon walls. It didn't sound like regular echoes. It sounded like words in a language I didn't know. I pulled out my phone and started recording. The sound got louder and louder until it felt like it was coming from inside my own head. Then, just as suddenly as it started, it stopped. Playing back the recording, I could hear something that I missed before. Under all those strange echoes was another sound, something that sounded like breathing. Heavy, raspy breathing, like someone with bad lungs. My hands were shaking as I put the phone away. I've been alone in these canyons hundreds of times, but this was different. For the first time in years, I felt like I was being watched. I decided to check out the pictographs next. They were about half a mile away, in a narrow side canyon we call the Painter's Alley. The ancient drawings there have been studied by scientists for decades. They show the usual stuff: hunters, animals, rain clouds. But lately they've been changing. I pulled out my camera and compared yesterday's photos with what I was seeing now. The differences were clear. Yesterday the drawings showed a group of people dancing in a circle. Today, those same figures were scattered, their arms raised like they were running away. And there was something new, a large, dark shape looming over them. As I stood there studying the wall, the temperature started rising again. My shirt was soaked with sweat, and the air felt thick, like before a storm. But there wasn't a cloud in the sky. That's when I noticed the shadows were wrong. It was about 8 a.m. and the sun was still low in the east. The shadows should have been stretching to my left, but they were moving. Actually moving, like someone was swinging a giant light source overhead. My heart was pounding now. Everything I'd seen, the crystals, the melted anchors, the changing pictures, the moving shadows, none of it made sense. But it all pointed to one thing. Something was very wrong in Devil's Canyon. I checked my map and made a decision. There was an old cave system nearby, one that wasn't on any tourist maps. If something strange was happening in the canyon, that cave would be the perfect hiding place. As I packed up my gear, I heard the whispers start again. This time they sounded closer. And this time, I could have sworn I heard my name. The rational part of my brain, the part that had helped me survive all these years, was screaming at me to turn back, to call for backup, to wait for help. But Sarah's face flashed in my mind. Whatever was happening here might explain what happened to her, and that thought alone was enough to make me keep going. I took one last look at the pictographs. The dark shape seemed bigger now, but maybe that was just my imagination. Taking a deep breath, I shouldered my pack and started walking toward the cave. I didn't know it then, but I was walking straight into a nightmare. The cave entrance was smaller than I remembered, just a dark crack in the canyon wall, barely wide enough for a person to squeeze through. My flashlight beam didn't seem to reach very far inside. The darkness just swallowed it up. I've explored hundreds of caves in my career, but something about this one made me pause. Maybe it was the way the air felt heavier here, or how the usual cave sounds, dripping water, distant echoes were missing. It was just silent. I did what I always teach new rescue team members to do. I tied a rope to a sturdy rock outside and attached the other end to my harness. It's an old caver's rule. Always leave yourself a way out. The passage started narrow but opened up after about 20 feet. The beam of my flashlight showed rough walls covered in more of those strange crystals. They weren't hot here like the ones outside, but they seemed to glow faintly, giving off a weak reddish light. I took out my phone to record a video, narrating what I saw. The crystals appear to be growing in patterns, almost like veins in the rock. They're cold to the touch, unlike the samples from outside. The formation doesn't match any mineral growth I've seen in my 25 years of cave work. That's when I heard the first echo. It wasn't like the whispers from outside. This was clearer, like someone calling out from deep in the cave. It sounded like singing, but not any song I knew. The voice was deep and somehow wrong, like someone trying to copy human speech, but not quite getting it right. I checked my oxygen meter. a habit from years of cave rescue. The reading was normal, so I wasn't hallucinating from bad air. The temperature display caught my eye, though. 68 degrees. Way too warm for this deep underground. Moving deeper into the cave, I found something that made my blood run cold. There was a small chamber off to the side, and in it were piles of gear, climbing equipment, backpacks, cameras, all covered in a thin layer of crystal. I recognized some of it. A blue helmet with a scratched visor, that belonged to Rick. Martinez, a climber who went missing last month. A purple backpack with a butterfly patch. Lisa Chen disappeared during a solo hike. And there, half buried in crystals, was a familiar red bandana. Sarah's, the one I gave her on our first date. My hands were shaking so bad I almost dropped my flashlight. I wanted to grab the bandana to keep this one piece of her, but something told me not to touch it. The crystals seemed to pulse slightly, like they had a heartbeat. I took pictures of everything and marked the location on my GPS. Then I noticed something else, markings on the wall behind the gear. Not modern graffiti, but old paintings like the ones in Painter's Alley. These were different, though. They showed a story. The first panel showed people gathered around a cave entrance. The next showed them offering something to a shape in the darkness. The third panel made my throat tight. It showed the shape coming out, surrounding the people with what looked like crystals. The last panel was the worst. It showed the canyon itself, but changed, twisted, like it had come alive. I remembered something Billy Whitehorse, one of our Native American guides, had told me years ago. A story about why certain parts of the canyon were forbidden to his people. He'd mentioned a hungry spirit that lived in the deepest caves, something that fed on more than just food. At the time, I'd thought it was just an old legend. Now I wasn't so sure. A sound echoed through the cave, that wrong voice singing again, but closer. The crystals around me pulsed brighter with each note. The air got warmer, thick and hard to breathe. I started backing away slowly, following my safety rope. That's when my flashlight caught something moving on the cave wall. The crystals were growing, spreading like frost on a window, but fast, too fast. I turned to run and almost fell. The rope, my safety line, was covered in crystals, growing, right before my eyes. I yanked hard and it shattered, sending crystal shards everywhere. The singing got louder, the air got hotter, and somewhere in the darkness behind me, something started moving. I ran. I'm not ashamed to admit it. 25 years of rescue experience, and I ran like a scared kid. The crystal growth chased me, spreading across the walls and ceiling. The singing turned to screaming, that same horrible, not quite human voice. Barely squeezed through the entrance crack before the crystals could seal it. Outside, the sun was setting. I must have been in the cave for hours without realizing it. Sitting on a rock, trying to catch my breath, I looked through the photos on my phone. They were all there. The gear, the paintings, the crystals. Proof that I wasn't crazy. Proof that something was down there. But the video recordings? Nothing but static and that awful singing. I knew I had to tell someone, had to get help. But who would believe me? Who would believe that something was living in the canyon caves? Something that could control temperature, create crystals, and make sounds that didn't obey the normal rules of nature. More importantly, who would believe that this thing had Sarah, Rick, Lisa, and who knows how many others? As the sun set, the temperature started rising again. That familiar whisper started up. But now I knew what it was. It wasn't an echo. It was a call. Like a spider feeling its web, the thing in the cave was sensing movement in the canyon. Hunting. I gathered my gear with trembling hands and started the long walk back to the ranger station. I had to warn someone. Had to try to stop this thing, before it took anyone else. But deep down, I knew this was just the beginning. The thing in the cave wasn't going to stay hidden much longer. And when it came out, well, that's what those last cave paintings showed. And the thought of that made walk a little faster as the darkness closed in behind me. I didn't sleep that night. How could I? Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those crystals growing, heard that awful singing. By morning, I knew I had to go back, not alone this time. I called an emergency meeting with the senior rangers. They sat quietly as I showed them the photos, played the static-filled recordings, and told them everything I'd seen. When I finished, the room was silent. "Tom," Chief Ranger Martinez said gently, "I know you're still hurting about Sarah, but this isn't about Sarah." I slammed my hand on the table, making coffee cups rattle. "People are dying out there. Whatever's in that cave, it's getting stronger. Look at the temperature readings." I spread out the charts I'd made. The hot spots in the canyon were spreading, like a fever growing in the earth. More hikers had gone missing overnight. 3 this time. Finally, Billy Whitehorse spoke up. He was our oldest guide, and he rarely talked during meetings. But when he did, everyone listened. "My grandfather," he said quietly, "told stories about a cave that was sealed long ago. A place where the old ones trapped something that came from deep in the earth, something that fed on heat and life itself. The stories say it could make people see things that weren't there, could call to them with voices they trusted." The room got very quiet. Outside, the sun was setting, painting the canyon walls blood red. That's when we heard the screams. Not from far away this time. These were close, right outside the ranger station. We all ran to the windows. Sarah was standing in the parking lot. My Sarah, looking exactly like she did the day she disappeared. She was waving at me, smiling that smile I'd missed so much. Behind her, the air seemed to shimmer like a mirage. "That's impossible," Martinez whispered. "Tom, that's..." I was already running for the door. Part of me knew it couldn't be real, but I didn't care. Billy tried to grab my arm, but I pushed past him. The parking lot was oddly warm when I burst outside. Sarah was still there, still smiling, but something was wrong. Her feet weren't quite touching the ground, and her eyes were glowing with that same red light I'd seen in the crystals. "Tom," she said, but it wasn't her voice. It was that wrong voice from the cave, trying to sound human and failing. "Come with me, I've missed you." The air around her began to twist. The mirage effect spread, making the world bend like I was looking through hot glass. And then I saw, really saw it, for the first time. It rose up behind Sarah's shape like a heat wave taking form. Transparent at first, then more solid. It was huge, filling half the parking lot. Its body looked like flowing glass or liquid crystal, constantly moving and changing shape. Where its face should have been, there were only swirling patterns of red light. Sarah's image flickered and disappeared. The thing had dropped its disguise. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. The air was so hot it burned my lungs. I heard car alarms going off. The heat was so intense it was triggering them. The asphalt under my feet began to soften. Thomas Reeves. The voice didn't come from the creature. It came from everywhere at once, an echo that had no source. "You have been searching for me." Behind me, I heard rangers shouting, doors slamming. Someone was pulling me backward. Billy's voice was in my ear. "Don't look at it directly, that's how it traps you." The creature flowed forward like water running uphill. Everywhere it touched, crystals began to grow. Cars, signs, the ground itself. Everything started to crystallize. "We have so much to show you," it said. "So many secrets in the deep places." My training kicked in. Years of rescue work had taught me how to think when everything went wrong. The creature was made of heat, or controlled it somehow. So maybe I broke free from Billy's grip and ran, not away from the creature, but toward the ranger station's water main. Every ranger station has one outside for filling water tanks and fighting fires. The thing followed me, leaving a trail of crystal growth behind it. That's what I was counting on. I reached the water main and spun the valve as hard as I could. A powerful spray of cold water burst out, hitting the creature directly. The sound it made was like 1,000 windows breaking at once. Steam filled the air as the water hit its hot surface. The creature's form wavered, pieces of it crystallizing and shattering, but it wasn't enough. The water was already starting to boil as it came out of the pipe. The creature was recovering, reforming itself. "You cannot stop the awakening," it boomed. "The deep places are opening, we will all rise." Then Billy was beside me, throwing something at the creature. A leather bag split open in the air. spraying white powder everywhere. Salt. The creature shrieked as the salt hit it, its crystal body cracking and splintering. The old ones used salt to seal it before, Billy shouted over the noise. It disrupts its ability to form crystals. The creature began to retreat, its body losing shape. The air was still hot enough to blister, but the temperature was dropping. With a sound like breaking glass and a final, earth-shaking echo, it flowed away into the growing darkness, leaving behind a trail of rapidly melting crystals. We stood there, gasping in the cooling air, looking at the destruction it had left behind. Half the parking lot was covered in crystal formations that were already starting to crumble. Car windows had melted. Metal signs were warped from the heat. Now, do you believe me? I asked Martinez, who was staring open-mouthed at the scene. He nodded slowly. What do we do now? I looked at the crystal trail leading away into the canyon. In the distance, I could hear that wrong voice singing starting up again. Now, I said, we get ready for war. Because that thing, that was just a greeting. It's going to come back. And next time, it's going to bring friends. Billy picked up a piece of the crystals, already turning to powder in his hand. The stories say there were more of them, many more, all sealed away in different caves. The sun had fully set now. In the darkness, we could see new points of red light appearing in the canyon, like eyes opening, like caves unsealing. The war for Devil's Canyon was about to begin. The next few days were like a nightmare that wouldn't end. We tried to close the canyon to visitors, but you can't just shut down one of America's biggest tourist spots without a good reason. And ancient heat creatures wasn't exactly something we could put in the official report. We did what we could. Posted dangerous conditions warnings. Closed the trails nearest to the cave systems. Doubled our ranger patrols. But it wasn't enough. The entities, that's what we started calling them, were spreading. Every night more red lights appeared in the canyon. More caves unsealed. The average temperature in the canyon rose 10 degrees in just 3 days. Was in the command center with Martinez when the first rescue team disappeared. 4 experienced rangers, loaded with water and salt supplies, went to check out reports of strange lights in the western canyon. Their radio conversation still haunts me. Base, this is Rescue Team 1. We're seeing some unusual crystal formations about 2 miles in. Copy that, Team 1. Keep your distance. Wait, is that music? Johnson, do you hear that? Base, we've got multiple heat signatures. Temperature rising rapidly. Oh God, they're everywhere. The walls are... Rodriguez, don't look at them. Don't... Static. Just static after that. We sent a second team to find them. They came back running. Half their gear crystallized, babbling about walls that moved and voices that called their names. Billy helped us set up defenses using his tribe's ancient knowledge. Salt barriers around the ranger stations. Special marks, painted on the walls that seemed to make the entities uncomfortable. But we were just treating symptoms, not the cause. The entities were getting smarter too. They learned they couldn't fool rangers with images of missing people anymore, so they started using different tricks. Mirages of rescue helicopters, making hikers think they were walking towards safety when really they were being led deeper into the canyon. Heat waves that created false trails, echoes that sounded like calls for help. I saw the toll it was taking on everyone. Rangers who'd worked the canyon for decades started jumping at shadows. The few tourists who ignored our warnings came back changed, if they came back at all. Some just stared at the canyon for hours, like they were listening to something we couldn't hear. Then came the night of the big storm. We'd been watching the weather reports. A rare desert thunderstorm was rolling in. We hoped the rain might help cool things down, maybe even drive the entities back into their caves. We were wrong. The storm hit just after sunset. Lightning lit up the canyon every few seconds, and in those flashes we could see them. Dozens of entities, maybe hundreds, rising from the caves like heat waves given form. The rain turned to steam before it could hit them, creating a fog that covered the canyon floor. That's when we discovered something terrifying. The entities could use the steam as a kind of bridge, flowing through it to reach places their heat couldn't touch before. The salt barriers sizzled and melted in the wet air. I was on the radio when the first emergency calls started coming in. The rocks are moving. There's something in my house. Everything's turning to crystal. The entities were pushing out of the canyon into the nearby towns. The steam from the storm was letting them spread further than ever before. Martinez made the call we'd been dreading. Full evacuation of all communities within 10 miles of the canyon. But how do you evacuate thousands of people in the middle of a storm with crystal-making heat creatures on the loose? It was chaos. Traffic jams on every road out. People panicking as their cars started to crystallize. The National Guard was called in, but their vehicles couldn't get close to the worst areas. The heat would melt their tires. I found myself at the old trading post with Billy, watching red lights dance through the storm clouds. The temperature was over 100 degrees despite the rain, and climbing. In the old stories, Billy said, wiping sweat from his face, when the entities first came, they nearly took over the whole world. The old ones barely stopped them. How? I asked. How did they seal them away? He pulled out a worn leather notebook. My grandfather's writings. He said the entities are connected to each other, and to certain places deep underground. Places where the Earth's heat touches the surface. If we could find the main connection point, we could seal them all at once, I finished. The idea hit me like lightning. The cave where I found Sarah's bandana, it was different from the others. Hotter, deeper. Billy nodded slowly. That could be it. But reaching it now, with so many entities active, we have to try, I said. Because if we don't, what happened to Sarah will happen to everyone. A massive thundercrack shook the building. Through the windows, we saw a huge entity forming in the middle of the storm, bigger than any we'd seen before. Rose up like a tower of flowing crystal, its red eyes scanning the evacuation routes. They're merging, Billy whispered. Getting stronger. Soon they'll be too powerful to stop. I looked at the notebook in his hands, then at the crystal-covered canyon beyond. We had one chance to end this. One chance to save everyone, and maybe, just maybe, find out what happened to Sarah. Get Martinez on the radio, I said. Tell him to gather everyone he can trust. We're going back to that cave. It's suicide, Billy said, but he was already reaching for his radio. Probably, I agreed. But if we don't try, everyone dies anyway. To emphasize my point, another entity rose up from the canyon, joining the first. Their combined heat was so intense the rain didn't even get close to them anymore. The final battle for Devil's Canyon was about to begin, and this time, only one side would walk away. We gathered in the basement of the ranger station. The concrete walls were covered in salt, and Billy's protective symbols were drawn everywhere. Wasn't much, but it kept the heat out. For now. Martinez spread a map across the table. 12 of us stood around it, the only rangers who volunteered for what might be a suicide mission. The others were helping with the evacuation, getting people to safety. The main cave is here, I said, pointing to the spot where I'd found Sarah's bandana. According to Billy's grandfather's notes, it should lead to their source, the place where they first came from. And what exactly are we supposed to do when we get there? Rodriguez asked. She was our best climber, but I could hear the fear in her voice. Billy placed his grandfather's notebook on the map. The entities are like a tree, he explained. What we see are the branches, but there's a root. The old ones used a mixture of salt and special rocks to seal that root. He opened his pack and pulled out some strange-looking stones. They were dark gray with red streaks, and they felt ice cold even in the hot room. These are from my tribe's sacred caves, he said. They absorb heat. The entities can't stand them. So we get to this root place and what? Throw rocks at it? Johnson asked. He was trying to joke, but nobody laughed. We plant these stones in a circle, Billy said. Then we use salt water to activate them. It should create a barrier that forces the entities back down and seals them away. Should? Martinez didn't sound convinced. It's the only plan we've got, I said. And we need to do it fast. Those things are getting stronger every hour. We divided up the gear. Water tanks filled with salt water, bags of pure salt, Billy Zoo, special stones, emergency flares, and radios. Everyone got a temperature gauge. When it hits 120 degrees, you're too close to an entity. One more thing, I added, pulling out some small mirrors. They can create illusions, make you see things you want to see, but they can't copy reflections. If you're not sure what's real, use these. A loud boom shook the building. Dust fell from the ceiling. The entities were getting closer to town. "We leave in 10 minutes, Martinez announced. "Say your goodbyes, if you need to." I stepped away from the group and pulled out my old photo of Sarah. "I'm going to find out what happened to you," I whispered. "I promise." The temperature gauge on the wall was climbing. Outside, the storm raged on, carrying the entity's terrible singing on the wind. We were about to head into the heart of Devil's Canyon, facing an enemy that could burn us alive or trap us in crystal forever. But we were also the only hope for stopping these things. Sometimes that's all you need, just enough hope to take the next step, even if that step might be your last. Getting to the cave was like walking through hell itself. The storm had turned the whole canyon into a steam bath, and entities were everywhere. We could see their red eyes watching us from the cliffs, their crystal bodies flowing like water in the darkness. We lost Johnson first. An entity made him see his young daughter calling for help. By the time we realized what was happening, he was already running toward the illusion. The crystals took him in seconds. Rodriguez screamed and tried to help, but Martinez and I held her back. There was nothing we could do. Billy led us forward, holding one of his cold stones out like a compass. The entity stayed back from it, hissing like hot metal dropped in water. But the stone was slowly getting warmer. We wouldn't have... The cave entrance was bigger now, much bigger. Heat poured out like from an open oven. Our temperature gauges were all in the red zone. "Look," Martinez whispered, pointing at the ground. Crystal veins were spreading out from the cave like roots from a tree. They pulsed with red light in time with the entities singing. That's when we heard it. A voice. Sarah's voice. "Tom, help me." It came from deep in the cave. I grabbed my mirror, hands shaking. The voice was a trick, had to be a trick, but what if it wasn't? "Stay focused," Billy said, gripping my shoulder. "Remember why we're here." We entered the cave in pairs, spraying salt water on the crystal growths to clear a path. The singing got louder, but it wasn't just one voice now, it was hundreds, all calling out with the voices of people we'd lost. The tunnel led down, deeper than I'd gone before. The air got thicker, harder to breathe. 4 more rangers turned back, their courage finally breaking. Can't blame them. The heat was unbearable, and the voices, those voices. Then we reached the chamber. It was huge, like a cathedral made of crystal. Red light pulsed from a pit in the center, lighting up the whole space. And floating above that pit was something big. Imagine a tornado made of liquid crystal and red light. That's what it looked like. This was the source, the root, the first entity that all the others came from. "Now you see." It spoke using 1,000 voices at once. "Now you understand." The walls of the chamber were covered in crystal cocoons. Inside each one we could see people, frozen, preserved, but alive. I saw Johnson, other missing rangers, tourists, and there in a cocoon near the pit was Sarah. Her eyes were open, aware, trapped. "They feed us," the entity said. "Their heat, their life, their memories. We grow stronger. Soon we will rise again, as we did in the time before." "Now," Billy shouted. "Place the stones." We ran to different points around the pit, pulling out the cold stones. The entity screamed, a sound that shattered crystal and made our ears bleed. Tentacles of crystal shot out, grabbing Martinez and 2 other rangers, dragging them toward cocoons. I reached Sarah's crystal prison. Her eyes met mine. Somehow I knew what she was trying to tell me, what I had to do. "The water tanks," I yelled. "Empty them into the pit." Rodriguez understood first. She threw her entire tank, salt water arcing through the hot air. The entity shrieked again as the water hit it. Steam exploded everywhere. The rest of us did the same, dumping all our salt water into the pit. The entity's form began to break apart. crystals shattering and reforming. The cold stone started glowing with a blue light, forming a circle of energy. "It burns," the entity roared. "The cold, the salt, just like before," Billy started, chanting in his native language, holding up his grandfather's notebook. The blue light grew stronger. The crystal cocoons began to crack, but we weren't done yet. Not even close. Because the entity had one last trick to play, and it was about to show us what it really looked like when it got angry. The entity exploded, upward, smashing through the cave ceiling. Not just crystal anymore, it was like a tornado made of pure red fire. Rock melted wherever it touched. The heat was so intense it felt like my skin was burning off. "The stones are cracking," Rodriguez, I screamed. She was right. The cold stones were starting to split from the heat. Billy's chanting got louder, but the entity was too strong. Crystal tentacles shot out everywhere trying to grab us. I ducked and rolled, ending up next to Sarah's cracking. Cocoon. That's when I saw it. A small stream of water trickling down the wall from where the entity had broken through to the surface. The storm. It was still raging up there. "Billy," I shouted. "The river, it runs right above us." He understood immediately. Pulling out his last cold stone, he threw it straight into the entity's center. At the same time, I shot my emergency flare at the crack in the ceiling. The explosion was huge. Water from the flooded canyon poured in like a waterfall. Steam filled the chamber as the entity shrieked. The cold stone's blue light suddenly blazed like the sun. "Now!" Billy roared over the noise. "The seal!" The remaining rangers threw all our salt into the rushing water. The entity's scream became deafening as the salty flood hit it. Its crystal body started breaking apart, falling into the pit. "You cannot end us," it thundered, but its voice was fading. The blue light from the stones shot upward in a circle, forming a barrier of pure cold energy. The entity tried to fight it, but the salt water kept pouring in. With a final earth-shaking roar, it collapsed into the pit. The crystal cocoons shattered all at once. People fell out everywhere. Sarah, Johnson, all of them. Alive but weak. The heat was fading, replaced by blessed coolness. Above us, through the hole in the ceiling, I could see the storm clearing. The red lights in the canyon were going out one by one. We had done it. The nightmare was over. But as I held Sarah in my arms, I knew we'd always remember the truth about Devil's Canyon. About what lived in its deepest caves, and we'd always be ready, just in case those cold stones ever started to warm up again. "It's not just my looks," she whispered. "I'm remembering things that haven't happened yet. I remember retiring next year, but that can't be right, can it?" I took out the old journal I'd been carrying, the one with notes from my paranormal investigation days. Between its pages, I found a yellowed newspaper clipping about local Native American legends. The tribal elders had warned about creatures they called time eaters, beings that lived in the spaces between moments, feeding on memories and years of people's lives. The Forest Service cameras were picking up strange images too. In one photo, taken at noon, the ancient grove was covered in snow. In the next photo, taken 1 minute later, it was middle of summer. And in every picture, if you looked closely, you could see shapes in the fog. Shapes that almost looked like people, but stretched and twisted in impossible ways. That afternoon, we found something even stranger. The trees near Crystal Lake had grown into perfect geometric shapes. Circles, triangles, and squares that couldn't happen in nature. It was like someone had taken pieces of different forests from different times and mixed them all together. Jenny touched one of the trees, and I watched in horror as her face shifted. Young, old, middle-aged, all in the span of seconds. "Howard," she said, her voice changing with her age, "I think they're taking our time, just like they took your family." I nodded, feeling the weight of my old family photos in my pocket. But now I wasn't sure if the memories in those photos were real anymore. Had Sarah's hair been blonde or brown? Had Tommy been 8 or 10 when we lost them? The more I tried to remember, the more the memories slipped away, replaced by ones that couldn't possibly be mine. The fog was getting thicker now, and in the distance, I could hear voices. My own voice, Jenny's voice, the voices of the missing. Researchers, all calling out from different times, different versions of this same forest. And somewhere in that fog, I knew, the time eaters were watching us, deciding which memories to take next. The world started falling apart on a quiet Wednesday morning. I was walking down the main trail when I saw myself coming the other way. Not just one version of me. There were 3. One looked younger, maybe from 10 years ago. Another looked older with gray hair. The third was wearing my old paranormal investigator jacket that I'd thrown away years ago. They didn't seem to notice me. They just walked past, talking to each other about things I hadn't done yet, or maybe never would do. It was like watching a TV show about different versions of my life. I ran to find Jenny, but when I got to the ranger station, something was wrong. She looked like a teenager, wearing a ranger uniform that was too big for her. She stared at me with blank eyes. "Who are you?" she asked. "And why am I wearing this uniform?" My heart sank. She'd gotten younger, but she'd lost all her memories too. 20 years of friendship gone just like that. I showed her our photos together, trying to help her remember, but she just shook her head. That's when the trees started to change. 1. Beneath I was standing in the forest, I knew. The next I was surrounded by saplings. The forest as it must have looked decades ago. Then suddenly the trees were ancient, huge, with vines growing all over them. It was like someone was flipping through time like pages in a book. I checked my phone's map, but it showed impossible things. Places that should have been miles apart were right next to each other. The ancient grove was somehow in 3 different spots at once, and the dates on my phone kept changing. 1930s, present day, years that hadn't happened yet. Walking through the park was like walking through a dream. I passed an old ranger station that had burned down in the 80s, but there it was, good as new. I saw hikers in old-fashioned clothes, using paper maps and wooden walking sticks. They looked as solid as you or me. But when I tried to talk to them, they couldn't hear me. Then I found something in the old station, a dusty folder marked Project Timekeeper 1932. Inside were photos of scientists standing around a strange machine. They were trying to study time itself, the notes said. They wanted to see if they could slow it down or speed it up. But something went wrong. The machine exploded, and the scientists, the pictures showed them turning into mist, becoming the first mist walkers. I was reading this when I heard a sound behind me. Jenny was there, but not teenage Jenny. This was my Jenny, the right age, looking at me with recognition in her eyes. But then another Jenny walked in, and another. Young, old, middle-aged, all of them real, all of them existing at once. "Howard," they said together, their voices echoing strangely. "They're coming." The fog was rolling in thick now, but this time I could see shapes in it. Human shapes, twisted and stretched, reaching out with misty hands. The failed scientists, still trying to control time after all these years. Through the windows, I could see different versions of the forest overlapping. Past, present, and future all mixed together. My head was pounding as new memories kept flooding in. Memories of lives I hadn't lived yet. Memories of things that would never happen. And somewhere in all that mess of time, I knew my family was still out there, trapped between moments, waiting for me to find them. But first, I had to stop the Mistwalkers, because if I didn't, there soon wouldn't be any time left to save. The fog grew thicker until I couldn't see more than a few feet ahead. All around me, I could hear whispers. My own voice, Jenny's voice, my family's voices, all mixing together like radio stations playing at the same time. The air felt heavy, like just before a thunderstorm, and my watch was spinning backwards so fast the hands were just a blur. That's when I saw them clearly for the first time. The Mistwalkers. They weren't exactly people anymore, but they weren't exactly fog either. They looked like pencil sketches of people that someone had smeared before the ink dried. They moved in jerky ways, like old film running too fast or too slow. "We just wanted to understand time," they whispered in voices that sounded like rustling leaves. "We just wanted to control it." I felt a tugging sensation in my head as they tried to take more of my memories. But this time, I noticed something. Every time they pulled a memory from me, the forest around us got more twisted, more wrong. They were using our memories, our moments of time, like fuel for their experiments. "Stop," I said, stepping forward. "You're tearing everything apart." Then I saw her, Sarah, my wife, standing in the mist. She looked just like she had 5 years ago, the day she and the kids disappeared. Behind her, I could see Tommy and Lisa playing, frozen between one moment and the next. "They're not gone," one of the Mistwalkers said. "They're just scattered, pieces of them in different times. We can give them back to you. Just give us more memories, more time." But I finally understood what I had to do. All these years, I'd been holding on to my memories of that day, replaying them over and over, trying to figure out what went wrong. Those memories were keeping the time breach open, like a wound that couldn't heal. I closed my eyes and did the hardest thing I've ever done. I let go. I let go of the morning Sarah made pancakes shaped like dinosaurs. I let go of Tommy's first bike ride. I let go of Lisa's kindergarten graduation. One by one, I felt the memories fade away, and with each one, I heard the Mistwalkers cry out. The fog started to thin. The different versions of the forest began to snap back into place, like puzzle pieces fitting together. Jenny, all the different Jennies, started merging back into one person, but it wasn't a complete fix. Some things stayed broken. Jenny still flickers sometimes, aging forwards and backwards when fog rolls in. I find letters in my desk that I wrote to myself from other timelines, warning me about things that never end up happening. And there are spots in the park where time still doesn't work quite right, places where you might see yourself walking ahead on the trail, or where spring and winter happen at the same time. The hardest part is that I can't remember my family's faces anymore. The photos show them, but the memories are gone. I gave them up to seal the breach, but sometimes, when I walk through the park on foggy mornings, I catch glimpses of them, not trapped anymore, but free, living out their lives, in another time, another place. And maybe that's better than holding them frozen in memories that were never going to change. I still work as a ranger in Olympic National Park. Someone needs to watch over the places where time runs thin, to make sure nothing like this happens. Again, Jenny helps me, even though she exists in multiple times at once now. We've learned to live with it. Learned to live with a lot of impossible things, really. The Mistwalkers are still out there too, but they're weaker now. They can't take memories anymore. They can only watch from the spaces between moments. Sometimes, on quiet mornings, I see their shapes in the fog and nod to them. They nod back. We've all lost things to time. That's just part of being human. But at least now I understand something I didn't before. Memories aren't meant to be held on to forever. They're meant to be let go, to make room for new ones. And maybe that's what time really is. Not something to control or trap, but something to experience and release, like breath, like mist, like love. The first thing I noticed was the breathing. Not mine, the cave's. I've been a park ranger at Carlsbad Caverns for 5 years now, and I've never heard anything like it. A soft, rhythmic whisper coming from deep within the rock, like a sleeping giant taking shallow breaths. My flashlight beam danced across the limestone walls, and for a second I could have sworn they moved. Control. This is Ranger Ramirez. I spoke into my radio, trying to keep my voice steady. I'm about 200 feet. Into the new passage, something's different down here, Static answered me. Of course, the earthquake must have messed with our communications. Just my luck. I shouldn't have come down here alone. But when the morning's tremors revealed this hidden passageway, I couldn't wait. Being underground used to feel like home, back in my military cave rescue days. That was before the collapse in Afghanistan, before I spent 16 hours trapped under tons of rock, wondering if each breath would be my last. My hands shook as I checked my gear one more time. Helmet secure, backup lights ready, water bottle full, first aid kit in place. The passage ahead narrowed and my chest tightened. Come on, Vic. You've done this 1,000 times. That's when I saw it, a glint of metal in my flashlight beam. I moved closer, my boots crunching on loose gravel. Half buried in the cave wall was an old metal box, its surface covered in rust. My heart skipped a beat when I saw the date stamped on its side. June 15th, 1947. This is impossible, I whispered to myself. According to every record we had, no expedition had ever accessed this part of the cave system. I carefully pried open the box, and a yellowed notebook fell out, along with some old tools and a camera that looked like it belonged in a museum. The first page of the notebook made my blood run cold. They're in the walls. God help us, they're in the walls. The handwriting was frantic, deep grooves torn into the paper. A low rumble shook the passage, and I grabbed the wall to steady myself. Under my gloved hand, the rock felt warm, way too warm for this depth. And then I felt it move, just slightly, like pressing your hand against someone's chest as they breathe. I yanked my hand back and shined my light on the wall. Dark shapes seemed to swim beneath the surface of the rock, like shadows under ice. My flashlight flickered, and the temperature rose another few degrees. That's when I saw the pictographs. They covered the wall ahead, crude drawings of tall, strange figures that seemed to be made of flowing stone. I reached out to touch one, telling myself I was being silly. Cave paintings don't move. They can't move. But as soon as my fingers brushed the ancient artwork, the figure writhed under my touch. The black pigment rippled like ink in water, and the creature in the drawing turned its head to look at me. I stumbled backward, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it echoing off the walls. No, not echoing. The sound was coming from the cave itself, a deep, steady rhythm that matched my own racing pulse. The passage behind me was different now. The walls had shifted, changed somehow. My carefully marked trail back to the surface had disappeared. I was trapped again. But this time, I wasn't alone in the dark, and whatever was down here with me was waking up. I pressed myself against a stable section of wall, trying to slow my breathing. Think, Vic, think. The rescue team would come looking for me soon. I just had to stay calm, and a soft scraping sound made me freeze. At first, I thought it was just loose rocks falling, but then I saw it. Part of the cave wall was moving. Not like before, with the subtle breathing motion. This time, the rock itself was flowing like thick honey, forming a shape that was almost human, but wrong in ways that made my skin crawl. It was tall, maybe 7 feet, with long arms that ended in fingers like stalactites. Its surface rippled with the same texture as the cave walls. Where its face should have been, there were only smooth indentations, like someone had pressed their thumbs into clay. I didn't move. I barely breathed. My training kicked in when faced with an unknown threat. Stay still and observe. The creature turned its head toward me, even though it had no eyes. The ground under my feet trembled slightly, sending vibrations up through my boots. Somehow I knew it could sense me through these vibrations, like a snake feeling movement through the earth. That's when I spotted the opening behind it. Not a natural cave passage. This was clearly made. The walls were too smooth, too regular. And beyond, I caught glimpses of what looked like a city. Huge columns stretched up into darkness, buildings that seemed to grow right out of the rock, all of it with that same liquid stone texture. This wasn't just a cave. This was something's home. Radio crackled, making me jump. Through the static, I heard voices. Ranger Ramirez, your location, rescue team en route. The creature's head snapped toward the sound. The rock around me started to shift. No, wait, I called out, but it was too late. The rescue team's headlamps appeared around the corner, and everything happened at once. The creature melted back into the wall. The other stone beings emerged all around us, rising from the floor, flowing down from the ceiling. My fellow rangers shouted in surprise. I saw Carlos, my partner, reach for me. Don't move, I yelled. They respond to vibrations if we stay still. But the creatures were already moving. The stone floor beneath the rescue team began to ripple and flow. I watched in horror as they started to sink, like quicksand made of rock. Carlos's hand stretched toward me, his eyes wide with panic. Vic! Then they were gone. The stone settled back to solid. 5 good people just gone, absorbed into the living rock. My equipment started to feel heavy. Looking down, I saw my gear was melting, being pulled into the cave walls. I quickly shed my backpack, watching as it sank into the stone like it was being digested. That's when I saw it. Half buried in the wall at chest height, something metallic and definitely not natural. Some kind of machine, ancient but definitely human-made. The rock around it pulsed with a faint green glow. These creatures weren't just living here. They were guarding something, and whatever it was, someone in the past had found it before. I had to get deeper into the cave. I had to find out what they were protecting, and somehow I had to find a way to save my friends. My hand brushed against the wall as I moved forward, and I noticed something strange. The stone didn't feel cold anymore. It felt like skin, warm and alive. And somewhere deep inside, I could feel a massive heartbeat calling me further down into the dark. The deeper I went, the more I understood. This wasn't just a cave system with creatures living in it. The whole thing was alive, one giant ancient being. The stone creatures were like white blood cells in a body, protecting it from invaders. From us. My skin tingled and burned. At first, I thought it was just fear, but when I looked at my hands under my flashlight, I saw tiny crystals forming on my skin. They flaked off when I rubbed them, but came back minutes later. Something was happening to me. That's when I started to feel it, a connection to the stone around me. I could sense where the walls were even with my eyes closed, like how you can feel someone standing close to you without looking. The cave wasn't just alive, it was trying to talk to me. I found more machines buried in the walls. They looked old, but somehow still hummed with energy. Government markings were everywhere. Dates going back to the 1940s, warning signs, classification stamps. They'd known about this place all along. A familiar voice echoed in my head. Vic? Carlos? I spun around, but he wasn't there. The voice seemed to come from the walls themselves. I can't feel my body anymore, Vic, but I'm here. We're all here. My hand touched the wall. It felt like touching a screen that separated me from my partner. He wasn't dead. He'd become part of the cave somehow. All of them had. The ground shook harder than before. Deep below, something massive was moving. The ancient machine started to glow brighter, and the whole cave system trembled like it was waking up from a long sleep. That's when I remembered something important. The cave entrance was close to the old nuclear waste disposal site. The creatures fed on radiation. That's why they were here. That's why the government had been watching them. But now, they're going to wake up. Carlos's voice whispered through the stone. All of them, everywhere. There are more hives, Vic, under every major city. They've been sleeping for centuries, but the radiation, it's making them stronger. I felt sick. If these things woke up under our cities, how many people would they absorb? How many would become like Carlos, conscious, but trapped in the stone? Forever? The crystals on my skin grew thicker. I could feel the cave's thoughts now, its plans. It wasn't evil, not really. It just saw humans as a threat, like germs in a body, and it was getting ready to fight back. I had a choice to make. The nuclear waste site was connected to these tunnels. I could use it to poison the hive, stop the awakening, but the radiation would be strongest where the creatures were most active, where they'd taken Carlos and the others. I could save the world, maybe, but I'd have to sacrifice my partner to do it. The cave's heartbeat grew stronger, and I felt its hunger for the radiation that would finally wake it up completely. Time was running out, and I still had to face the queen. I followed the cave's heartbeat to its source. The tunnel opened into a chamber bigger than a football stadium, its walls covered in glowing green veins. And there, in the center, was the queen. She wasn't like the others. She was the size of a house, her stone body flowing like water, forming and reforming into different shapes. Dozens of face-like impressions appeared and disappeared across her surface. The crystals on my skin burned at the sight of her. "You're killing them," her thoughts pushed into my mind. Not in words exactly, but in feelings I somehow understood. "Your kind, your radiation, your cities poisoning the earth. We can find another way," I said out loud, knowing she could feel the vibrations of my voice. "You don't have to absorb people. We can work together." Images flashed through my head. Centuries of sleep, other hives awakening, an army of stone beings rising up through the streets of every major city. She was determined to protect the earth from us, no matter the cost. "Carlos," I whispered to the walls. "I have a plan, but I'm so sorry." I felt his response through the stone. "Do what you have to do, Vic." I ran, not toward the exit, but deeper, toward where the radiation would be strongest. The queen realized what I was doing a second too late. Stone tentacles burst from the walls, trying to grab me, but now I could feel them coming. My body knew how to move with the rock, not against it. I found the waste storage area, a sealed chamber full of barrels marked with radiation symbols. The queen's stone warriors were right behind me. I took a deep breath and kicked one of the barrels as hard as I could. It cracked. The effect was instant. The radiation levels spiked, but not the kind these creatures needed. This was the toxic stuff, the kind that kills. The stone beings started to crumble. The walls themselves began to crack. "Run!" Carlos's voice echoed through the stone one last time. "The whole place is coming down." I ran back through the tunnels as the cave system started to collapse. My new connection to the stone helped me find the safe path. Behind me, I felt the queen dying, felt her control over the other hives breaking. When I finally made it out, half the mountain had caved in. The government showed up within hours, but there wasn't much left for them to study. Just a lot of normal-looking rock. That was 3 months ago. Most days I can almost pretend everything's back to normal. But sometimes when I touch a building or walk on a sidewalk, I can feel echoes of what's underneath. The other hives are still out there, sleeping again, waiting. The crystals still appear on my skin sometimes, especially when I'm stressed. And late at night, when everything is quiet, I can hear Carlos. Not just him. All of them. Their voices whisper through the stone of my apartment walls. They're still alive in a way, still aware. Yesterday I found a handwritten note in my office. The stone of my desk had formed the words all by itself. "Thank you for saving us from ourselves." It was signed, Carlos. I keep thinking about what the Queen showed me. She wasn't wrong about everything. We do need to take better care of the earth. But maybe next time we can find a way to do it together. Humans and stone beings both. For now, though, I have a new job. There are other government facilities built near other sleeping hives. They need someone who can sense what's coming. Someone who can stop it before it starts. Someone who can talk to the stones. And sometimes, just sometimes, the stones talk back. Before the strange events in the cave, I remember the morning everything changed like it was yesterday. I was sitting in my tiny ranger office at Carlsbad Caverns, staring at a photo on my desk. It showed me and my team from my military days, all of us grinning in our cave rescue gear. That was before the collapse in Afghanistan, before the 16. Hours trapped in the dark changed me forever. My coffee was still warm when the first tremor hit. Just a small one at first, the kind that makes your coffee ripple like in that dinosaur movie. But then came the big one. Pictures fell off walls. My coffee mug danced right off the desk and shattered. "Everyone okay?" I called out, running into the visitor center. Tourists were holding onto railings and displays, wide-eyed but unhurt. Sarah, our front desk guide, was already calming people down. "Just a 4.2, she said, checking her phone. "Epicenter's about 3 miles from here." That's when Tommy, one of our junior rangers, burst through the door. His face was flushed like he'd been running. Vic, you need to see this." I followed him down to the main cave entrance. The earthquake had done something strange. Where there used to be a solid wall of rock, there was now a crack just wide enough for a person to squeeze through. Cool. Air flowed out of it, carrying a smell I'd never encountered before in all my years of caving. Something metallic and ancient. "Should we call it in?" Tommy asked. I checked my watch. It would take hours for the geology team to arrive and assess the situation. By then, any immediate dangers, like unstable rocks, could have gotten worse. As lead ranger and cave rescue specialist, it was my job to do an initial safety check. "I'll do a quick recon," I said, checking my gear. "Standard protocol. If I'm not back in 2 hours, call it in." Tommy nodded but looked worried. "You sure you want to go alone after, He meant after Afghanistan, after the collapse. After I developed claustrophobia so bad I sometimes couldn't even ride in elevators. But I'd worked hard to manage my fear. This was my job. "I'll be fine," I said, not entirely believing it. Just a quick look. I did my standard gear check twice. Helmet with fresh batteries in the lamp, backup flashlight, emergency flares, first aid kit, water bottle, radio. Everything clipped and secured. The crack was awkward to get through. I had to turn sideways and squeeze past a chunk of limestone that seemed to hang there like a frozen wave. The rock felt weird under my gloves, warmer than it should be at this depth. My headlamp beam cut through the darkness ahead. The passage was roughly circular, about 6 feet high, leading down at a gentle angle. Perfect cave formation, almost. Too perfect. Like it had been carved. That's when I heard it. The breathing. At first, I thought it was just the normal air movement you get in caves. Air pressure changes can make whistling sounds, create drafts. But this was different. This was rhythmic, regular, like something huge was sleeping nearby. Control. "This is Ranger Ramirez," I spoke into my radio, trying to keep my voice steady. "I'm about 200 feet into the new passage. Something's different down here." Static answered me. Just static. The beam of my headlamp caught something that shouldn't be there. Metal. Old metal, half buried in the cave wall. I moved closer, my boots crunching on loose gravel. It was a box, badly rusted, with a date stamped on its side. June 15th, 1947. My hands shook as I carefully pried it open. Inside was a notebook, its pages yellow with age and some old tools. The kind of stuff you'd expect from a 1940s cave expedition. Except, there had never been an expedition here. Every cave in Carlsbad was documented, mapped, explored. This passage hadn't existed until today. I opened the notebook. The first page made my blood run cold. The handwriting was frantic, deep grooves torn into the paper. They're in the walls. God help us. They're in the walls. A low rumble shook the passage. I grabbed the wall to steady myself, and that's when I felt it. The rock was warm, too warm, and under my gloved hand it moved, just slightly, like pressing your hand against someone's chest as they breathe. My headlamp flickered. The temperature rose another few degrees, and there, on the wall ahead, were the pictographs. Ancient drawings covered the rock face. Tall, strange figures that seemed to flow like water. I reached out to touch one, telling myself I was being silly. Cave paintings are just paintings. They can't move. My fingers brushed the black pigment. The figure writhed under my touch like ink coming alive. And then, impossibly, it turned its head to look at me. I stumbled backward, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it echoing off the walls. No, not echoing. The sound was coming from the cave itself, a deep, steady rhythm that matched my own racing pulse. When I turned to run, the passage behind me had changed. The walls had shifted somehow, the rock flowing like thick honey. My carefully marked trail back to the surface had vanished. I was trapped. Again. But this time the darkness wasn't empty, and whatever was down here with me, it was waking up. Joe Running Bear was waiting for me when I got to his house, like he knew I was coming. "You've seen it," he said. It wasn't a question. I told him everything, about Marcus, about the ice cave, about the army of frozen people. He listened quietly, carving something into a piece of wood with an old knife. "There's a place," he said finally, "a sacred circle where our ancestors once fought the hunger spirit. The ground there is still powerful. If you can lure it there." He handed me the piece of wood. It was a map. "But you need to understand something, Will," he added. "The Wendigo can't be killed. The best we can do is send it back to sleep. And we'll want payment." "What kind of payment?" "A sacrifice, a piece of yourself freely given." I thought about Marcus, about those teenagers, about all the people hanging in that ice cave. "I'll do whatever it takes." Joe gave me blessed weapons, an ancient spear and a pouch of herbs that would burn even in the deepest cold. He taught me the words I needed to say. Then he looked at me for a long time. "You might not come back from this, Will," I nodded. "I know." The plan was simple. I would go to the sacred circle, start a fire with the blessed herbs, and wait. The Wendigo would smell the smoke. It hated the scent of these particular herbs. Then I'd have to be quick. I picked the spot carefully, following Joe's map to an old clearing. The trees around it were marked with the same symbols I'd seen before. I started the fire and waited. It didn't take long. The temperature dropped so fast my breath turned to ice. Then I heard Sarah's voice behind me. "Will, why are you doing this? Come home with me." I didn't turn around. Instead, I gripped the spear tighter and started saying the words Joe taught me. They were in his people's language, and I probably said them wrong. But it didn't matter. The Wendigo roared. When I finally looked, it was there in its true form. No more tricks, no more illusions, just 15 feet of ancient hunger and rage. It moved faster than anything that big should be able to move. I rolled away as its claws slashed the air where I'd been standing. The blessed spear cut into its leg, and the creature screamed. A sound like breaking ice and howling wind. But I'd underestimated how strong it was. One swipe of its arm sent me flying. I crashed into a tree, the spear spinning away into the... No. The Wendigo loomed over me, its mouth opening wider than any mouth should. That's when I remembered what Joe said about a sacrifice. About giving up a piece of myself willingly. I looked into the Wendigo's eyes, those terrible, hungry eyes, and held up my left hand. "You want something to eat?" I said. "Here, take it." I thrust my hand into its mouth. The pain was... I can't describe the pain, but I kept my mind focused on the words, the ancient words that would send this thing back to sleep. I screamed them as frost crept up my arm and the Wendigo's teeth closed. There was a flash of blue-white light, a sound like 1,000 windows breaking at once. Then, silence. I woke up 3 days later in the hospital. My left hand was gone, a clean cut at the wrist, the doctors said. They couldn't explain why there was no blood loss or why the wound looked like it had been frozen and thawed 100 times. The Wendigo was gone. The ice cave had collapsed, burying everything inside. The bodies were never found. The official report blamed everything on a combination of strange weather patterns and animal attacks. But things are different now. My hair turned white, all of it overnight. And I can sense things. I know when the weather's going to change. I can feel the seasons shifting. And sometimes in the deepest part of winter, I know exactly where the Wendigo is sleeping. It's not dead. Joe was right about that. It's just waiting. And every winter when the first snow falls, I find something in my pocket. Marcus's tongue, frozen solid like a reminder. A warning because the Wendigo will wake up again someday. And when it does, I'll be ready. But that's not the scariest part. The scariest part is the hunger I feel sometimes, late at night when the moon is full and the wind is howling, a hunger that doesn't feel like my own. I gave the Wendigo my hand that night. I just hope that's all it took from me. It was during my night patrol when I first heard the voices on my radio. Usually there's just static and occasional chatter from other rangers, but this was different. Through the crackling, I heard someone calling for help. Please. Anyone. So cold. I recognized that voice. It belonged to Tom Fisher, a hiker who'd gone missing 3 weeks ago. We'd searched for him for days but never found a trace. Now here he was, somehow broadcasting on our frequency. Tom, this is Ranger Henderson. What's your location? I asked, my hand tight on the radio. The voice changed then. It wasn't Tom anymore. It was Sarah's voice. My Sarah, who'd been gone for 6 months. Will. Why didn't you save me? I dropped the radio like it had burned me. It hit the floor of my truck, still playing voices, different ones now, all mixing together, all begging for help. With shaking hands, I switched it off. The silence that followed was almost worse than the voices. The next day, I hiked out to check some of our remote cameras. That's when I found the cave. I'd never seen it before, even though I thought I knew every inch of this forest. The entrance was small, barely visible behind some fallen trees. Something about it made my skin crawl, but I had to look. That was my job. I clicked on my flashlight and ducked inside. The beam caught something white on the walls, and for a second I thought it was ice. It wasn't. They were teeth, hundreds of human teeth, pressed into the rock like someone had carefully placed each. Some looked old, yellowed and worn. Others looked fresh. My hands were steady as I took photos. Years of medical training in Korea taught me to keep calm even when my mind was screaming to run. But I couldn't stop thinking about those teeth. Where did they come from? Who put them there? Back at the station, I found something in our old archives, a journal from 1922, written by Ranger James Cooper. His handwriting was messy, desperate, but I could read enough. It speaks with their voices, makes you see things you want to see. The cold follows it. 3 more missing today. Tracks in the snow lead nowhere. Native folks say it's the Wendigo, but that's just stories. Has to be. Though I saw Thompson yesterday walking in the storm. Thompson's been dead 2 weeks. The journal ended there. When I looked up what happened to Ranger Cooper, all I found was a simple note. Missing in action, presumed dead. February 1922. I was still reading when Marcus, my partner, burst in. His face was pale. Will, you need to see this, now. We found the 4 teenagers near Eagle Ridge. They'd been camping, against the rules this time of year. Now they were just frozen, solid ice, like statues. Their tongues were missing, clean cuts like a surgeon had done it. The weirdest part? No footprints in the snow around them, not even their own. I radioed it in, and soon the place was crawling with police and medical examiners. Nobody could explain how bodies could freeze so completely in temperatures that weren't even below 0. I watched them load the bodies into trucks, feeling sick. This was my forest. These were my people to protect. That night, the blizzard came out of nowhere. The weather service hadn't predicted it. The sky had been clear just hours before. I was driving back to my cabin when I saw her through the swirling snow. Sarah. She was standing by the road in her favorite blue dress, the one we buried her in. Her hair was moving in the wind, and she was smiling that sweet smile I missed so much. For a moment, just a moment, I forgot everything I knew about the strange things happening in the forest. I forgot about the voices on the radio and the teeth in the cave. I just wanted to hold her one more time. My hand was reaching for the door handle when I noticed her feet weren't touching the ground. And then Marcus called on the radio, his voice shaking. "Will, something's wrong. My skin, there's something happening to my skin." When I got to his cabin, I found him hunched over his bathroom sink. In the harsh fluorescent light, I could see what he meant. Frost-like patterns were spreading across his arms and face like ice crystals growing on a window. When he looked up at me, his eyes were different, cloudy, like frozen lakes. "I'm so hungry, Will," he whispered. "I'm so hungry it hurts." That's when I knew. Whatever evil had awakened in these woods, it wasn't just watching anymore. It was hunting. I stayed with Marcus that night. I couldn't leave him alone, not with those frost patterns spreading across his skin. I tried everything. Warm, blankets, hot coffee, even cranking up his cabin's heat as high as it would go. Nothing helped. He just kept getting colder. "Will," he said around midnight, his teeth chattering so hard I could barely understand him. If I turn into something else, you have to stop me. Promise me." I promised. I'd seen enough death in Korea to know when someone was saying goodbye. The change happened fast. One minute, Marcus was huddled under blankets. The next, he was screaming. His skin turned blue-white like deep ice. His fingers stretched into claws. When he opened his mouth, his teeth had grown sharp, and his tongue was black with frost. The thing that used to be Marcus lunged at me. I barely dodged in time. He was faster now, stronger. But worst of all was his voice. It still sounded like him. "I'm so hungry, Will. Just a bite, please. It hurts so much." I had my gun, but I couldn't do it. Not yet. This was Marcus. We'd worked together for 8 years. He was at Sarah's funeral. He brought me food when I couldn't get out of bed after she died. But when he crashed through the window and started running toward town, I knew I had to stop him. I couldn't let him hurt anyone else. I chased him through the forest. The snow was falling so thick I could barely see, but I could follow his tracks. They started as human footprints, but slowly changed into something else. Something with long toes and sharp claws. I caught up to him near Miller's Creek. He had a young deer cornered. I didn't hesitate this time. I aimed and fired twice, the eye. Shots echoed through the trees. Marcus fell. As I watched, his body started to change back. In his last moments, his eyes cleared. He looked like himself again. "Thank you," he whispered. Then he was gone. I radioed in that I'd found a large predator threatening the town and had to put it down. It wasn't exactly a lie, but as I stood there in the snow, I heard something moving in the darkness. Something big. That's when I saw it. The real thing. The Wendigo. It was huge. 15 feet tall at least. Its body was like a skeleton wrapped in gray, stretched skin. Antlers grew from its head, covered in old blood. But its eyes were the worst part. They were human eyes, filled with a hunger that made my stomach turn. I ran. What else could I do? I ran back to the ranger station and locked myself in. I spent the whole night going through our missing persons files. 50 years worth. Hundreds of people who vanished in these woods. All in winter. All around. The same areas. But I knew I had to go back out. People were still dying. The Wendigo was still out there. So I started hiking, following the coldest parts of the forest. That's how I found the ice cave. It was hidden behind a frozen waterfall. Inside, the walls glowed blue. And hanging from the ceiling like butterflies in a collection were bodies. Dozens of them. Some were fresh, some were old, all perfectly preserved in the ice. They weren't dead. Not completely. I could see their eyes moving, following me. That's when I understood what the Wendigo was doing. It wasn't just killing people, it was keeping them, saving them, building an army of frozen, hungry things that used to be human. I found Tom Fisher there, the missing hiker whose voice I'd heard on the radio. His body was half transformed, skin turning to ice, fingers stretching into claws. When he saw me, he tried to speak. All that came out was a cloud of frozen air. I had to end this, had to stop it before it could turn more people. But how do you kill something that's survived for hundreds of years? Something that can control ice and snow, that can make you see the people you've lost most? I needed help, and I knew exactly where to get it. I just hoped Joe Running Bear would know what to do. Because if he didn't, the Boundary Waters would become a hunting ground for something worse than any natural predator. And every missing person, every frozen body in that cave, would become part of its endless hungry army. Joe Running Bear was waiting for me when I got to his house, like he knew I was coming. "You've seen it," he said. It wasn't a question. I told him everything. About Marcus, about the ice cave, about the army of frozen people. He listened quietly, carving something into a piece of wood with an old knife. "There's a place," he said finally. "A sacred circle where our ancestors once fought the hunger spirit. The ground there is still powerful. If you can lure it there." He handed me the piece of wood. It was a map. "But you need to understand something, Will," he added. "The Wendigo can't be killed. The best we can do is send it back to sleep. And it will want payment." "What kind of payment?" "A sacrifice, a piece of yourself freely given." I thought about Marcus, about those teenagers, about all the people hanging in that ice cave. "I'll do whatever it takes." Joe gave me blessed weapons, an ancient spear and a pouch of herbs that would burn even in the deepest cold. He taught me the words I needed to say. Then he looked at me for a long time. "You might not come back from this, Will." I nodded. "I know." The plan was simple. I would go to the sacred circle, start a fire with the blessed herbs, and wait. The Wendigo would smell the smoke. It hated the scent of these particular herbs. Then I'd have to be quick. I picked the spot carefully, following Joe's map to an old clearing. The trees around it were marked with the same symbols I'd seen before. I started the fire and waited. It didn't take long. The temperature dropped so fast my breath turned to ice. Then I heard Sarah's voice behind me. "Will, why are you doing this? Come home with me." I didn't turn around. Instead, I gripped the spear tighter and started saying the words Joe taught me. They were in his people's language, and I probably said them wrong, but it didn't matter. The Wendigo roared. When I finally looked, it was there in its true form. No more tricks, no more illusions, just 15 feet of ancient hunger and rage. It moved faster than anything that big should be able to move. I rolled away as its claws slashed the air where I'd been standing. The blessed spear cut into its leg, and the creature screamed. A sound like breaking ice and howling wind. But I'd underestimated how strong it was. One swipe of its arm sent me flying. I crashed into a tree, the spear spinning away into the snow. The Wendigo loomed over me, its mouth opening wider than any mouth should. That's when I remembered what Joe said about a sacrifice. About giving up a piece of myself willingly. I looked into the Wendigo's eyes, those terrible, hungry eyes, and held up my left hand. "You want something to eat?" I said. "Here, take it." I thrust my hand into its mouth. The pain was... I can't describe the pain, but I kept my mind focused on the words, the ancient words that would send this thing back to sleep. I screamed them as frost crept up my arm and the Wendigo's teeth closed. There was a flash of blue-white light, a sound like 1,000 windows breaking at once. Then, silence. I woke up 3 days later in the hospital. My left hand was gone, a clean cut at the wrist, the doctors said. They couldn't explain why there was no blood loss, or why the wound looked like it had been frozen and thawed 100 times. The Wendigo was gone. The ice cave had collapsed, burying everything inside. The bodies were never found. The official report blamed everything on a combination of strange weather patterns and animal attacks. But things are different now. My hair turned white, all of it overnight. And I can sense things. I know when the weather's going to change. I can feel the seasons shifting. And sometimes in the deepest part of winter, I know exactly where the Wendigo is sleeping. It's not dead. Joe was right about that. It's just waiting. And every winter when the first snow falls, I find something in my pocket. Marcus's tongue, frozen solid like a reminder. A warning because the Wendigo will wake up again someday. And when it does, I'll be ready. But that's not the scariest part. The scariest part is the hunger I feel sometimes, late at night when the moon is full and the wind is howling. A hunger that doesn't feel like my own. I gave the Wendigo my hand that night. I just hope that's all it took from me. The howl that woke me that night wasn't like anything I'd heard in my 15 years as a park ranger. It wasn't the usual song of a wolf calling to its pack. This sound dug straight into my bones and made my hands shake. Even my coffee mug trembled, spilling dark drops onto my desk at the ranger station. I'm Rick Matthews, and I know these forests better than I know myself. The Payette National Forest has been my home since I came back from Vietnam, where I learned, the hard way, how to track things that didn't want to be found. My Nez Perce grandmother used to tell me I had wolf blood in my veins. Maybe that's why the sound of that howl felt so wrong. It started 3 weeks ago, when Dave Cooper, a local rancher, called about his cattle. I dealt with wolf attacks before, but this was different. The cows weren't just killed. They were cut open with what looked like surgical precision. Clean lines, like someone used a knife instead of teeth and claws. I took photos, filed my report, and tried to ignore the way the hair on the back of my neck stood up when I looked at the wounds. Dad, something's not right with the wolves. My daughter Sarah called me the next day. At 16, she's got the same instincts I do, the same connection to these woods. They're moving weird, like they're following orders. I'd noticed it, too. The local packs were acting strange, moving in formations I'd never seen before. It reminded me of patrol patterns from my army days. Wolves don't do that naturally. They're not soldiers, but something was making them act like they were. The old mine entrance we found afterward only made things worse. The claw marks around it were fresh, but they were huge, bigger than any wolf or bear I'd ever tracked. And they went straight, up the rock face like whatever made them could walk upright. Then the hunters started coming in with their stories. Jim Baker, an old-timer who'd been hunting these woods since before I was born, swore he saw a wolf walking on 2 legs in the moonlight. I might have dismissed it as too much whiskey, but 3 other hunters reported the same thing that week. I was trying to make sense of it all when Sarah called me again. This time she was crying. Max is gone, Dad. Max was her black lab, the puppy I got her after the divorce. I found his collar by the creek. There's blood on it. That same night, the sheep at Wilson's farm went crazy. All 50 of them ran straight off a cliff, like they were running from something worse than death. The strange howl we heard just before it happened, the same one that woke me tonight, seemed to drive them mad. I'm writing this down because people need to know what's happening here. The wolves are changing, becoming something else. And now, as I look out my station window at the full moon rising over the pines, I can see shapes moving between the trees. They're walking upright, and they're watching me. My hands are still shaking as I load my rifle, but not from fear. Deep in my blood, in that part of me that my grandmother said came from the wolves, something is waking up. Whatever's out there might be hunting us, but it's about to learn that it's not the only hunter in these woods. I just pray I can figure out what we're dealing with before it's too late, because the howls are getting closer. And Sarah says she's starting to hear voices in them. I'd been up all night when Sarah called again. Her voice was shaking. Dad. I saw Max last night, but it wasn't really him. She paused, and I could hear her trying not to cry. He was standing on his back legs, Dad, like a person. He looked at me through my bedroom window. My mouth went dry. Stay where you are, I'm coming to get you. The drive to my ex-wife Janet's house only takes 20 minutes, but it felt like hours. The morning fog hung low over the road, and every shadow in the trees looked like it might be watching me. I never made it to Sarah's. Halfway there, I got an emergency call from Deputy Wilson. They'd found 3 hunters in the woods, or what was left of them. The scene was like nothing I'd ever seen, not even in Vietnam. Their hearts were missing, but there weren't any cuts on their chests. Instead, there were holes going straight through their backs, right through their spines. Like something had reached inside and pulled the hearts out from behind. "Look at these tracks," Wilson said, pointing at the ground. "Wolf prints, but wrong somehow. Some were normal, but others looked half-human, like something changing as it walked." That afternoon, I visited my grandmother's sister, Mary, on the reservation. She's the oldest person I know who still remembers the old stories. The signs were in our legends, she told me, her wrinkled hands wrapped around a cup of tea. Every 200 years, they said, the wolf who walks returns. It calls to our blood, makes the wolves remember when they were something else, something older. Thought about Sarah seeing Max, about Janet acting strange lately, staring at the moon and humming tunes I'd never heard before. On my way back to the station, I saw it. The wolves, at least 30 of them, moving through the trees in perfect formation. They were hunting in groups of 3, just like we did in Vietnam. Each group covered the others, moving like they'd been trained for years. What scared me most wasn't their movement. It was their eyes. They were thinking, planning. I found the cave that evening, hidden behind an old waterfall. The walls were covered in paintings, hundreds of years old. They showed people transforming into wolves, and something bigger standing over them. The paintings showed the same thing happening again and again every 200 years. And at the bottom, there was a picture of people laying hearts on a stone altar. My phone rang. It was Janet. "Rick?" Her voice sounded far away, dreamy. "Do you hear it? The singing in the hills?" "Janet, where are you?" "It's so beautiful. I have to go to it. We all do. Janet, listen to me. Stay in the house. I'm coming." The line went dead. In the distance, I heard it, that howl again. But this time, I could hear something else in it. Words, almost. A song that made me want to walk into the woods and never come back. I gripped the steering wheel harder and started driving toward Janet's house. The sun was setting, and I knew that whatever was out there, whatever was changing the wolves and calling to my family, it would be stronger in the dark. But so was the wolf blood in my veins, and I was done being hunted. I just hoped I wasn't too late, because the last painting in that cave showed what happened to the people who answered the howl's call. And now I knew why we hadn't found any bodies in the woods. They weren't dead. They were changing. I found Janet's car parked at the old hiking trail, empty. But what scared me most was Sarah's backpack in the passenger seat. My phone lit up with a text from Sarah. "Mom's acting weird. Her eyes look different. I followed her, but now I don't. Feel good." My hands shook as I texted back, "Where are you?" "The old Firewatch tower." "My arms hurt, Dad. Something's wrong with my skin." I ran, faster than I ever had, even in Vietnam. The moon was rising, painting the forest in silver light. Every shadow looked like a wolf standing on 2 legs. When I reached the tower, I heard voices. Janet was talking, but her voice wasn't her own anymore. It had a growl in it. "It's a gift, Sarah. The Alpha chose us. Can't you feel your true self waking up?" I took the tower stairs 2 at a time. At the top, I froze. Sarah was curled, in the corner, shaking. Her fingers were longer than they should be, and dark fur was growing along her arms. Janet stood by the window, but she wasn't really Janet anymore. Her face was stretched, halfway between human and wolf. When she smiled, her teeth were sharp. "Rick," she said, "you're just in time for our daughter's first change." "Dad," Sarah whimpered, "make it stop, please." "Fight it, Sarah," I said, stepping closer. "Whatever you're feeling, don't let it take over." Janet laughed, but it turned into a howl. "You don't understand. This is what we were always meant to be. Every 200 years, the Alpha returns to remind us. We're not meant to be human." Outside, wolves howled, dozens of them. But they weren't normal howls. They had patterns like military signals. Through the window, I saw them moving through the trees in perfect formations, herding something. No, not something. Someone. My partner, Tom, stumbled into the clearing below. The wolves circled him, moving like soldiers. As the moonlight touched him, he screamed. I watched in horror as he fell to his knees, his uniform ripping as his body changed. The Alpha is calling everyone with the old blood, Janet said. Her voice was barely human now. Look at your hands, Rick, you can feel it too. She was right, my fingers were tingling, trying to grow into claws. The wolf blood in my veins was answering the call. I pulled out my gun, loaded with silver bullets I'd made that morning. Janet laughed again. Silver? The story's got that wrong. Silver makes us stronger. To prove it, she grabbed my gun. The silver bullets fell into her palm, and I watched in horror as they melted into her skin. Her change sped up, fur rippling across her body. Dad, Sarah cried. The voice in my head. It's so loud. I ran to her, holding her as she shook. Her skin was burning hot. Fight it, baby, remember who you are. But that's just it, said a new voice, deep, inhuman. I turned. In the doorway stood something impossible. It looked like a wolf, but it was as tall as a man, with eyes that glowed like fire. The Alpha. She's remembering who she really is. It said, who you all are. The great forgetting is over. Its words had power. Each one made the wolf blood in my veins sing, made me want to let go of being human. But as I held Sarah, feeling her fight against the change, I remembered something. My grandmother told me about how our ancestors didn't just have wolf blood. They had something else too. Something older. Maybe silver bullets wouldn't work, but I had a feeling the old ways might. I just had to remember the ritual before I lost myself to the howling, in my blood. My grandmother's words echoed in my head. The wolf is not our only spirit. When the time comes, you'll have to choose which part of your blood speaks loudest. Sarah screamed as another wave of change hit her. Fur was spreading across. Her face now. Janet, or what used to be Janet, moved to our daughter's side. Her wolfish features twisted in what looked like concern. The Alpha watched us with those burning eyes. You can't stop this, Richard Matthews. The old blood will awaken. But I knew where we had to go. Sarah, I said, can you walk? She nodded, fighting through the pain. I helped her up, keeping myself between her and the Alpha. The burial grounds, I said. That's where this has to end. The Alpha's mouth curved into something like a smile. Yes, where it began. Where the first change happened. We left the tower. Together, me, my half-transformed daughter, my ex-wife who was mostly wolf now, and the monster who'd started it all. The pack followed us through the trees, moving like a military escort. My partner Tom was among them, his police uniform hanging in tatters from his fur-covered body. The old burial ground lay in a valley that seemed darker than it should be, even under the full moon. Ancient stones formed a circle, their surfaces carved with symbols I'd seen in my grandmother's books. The Alpha stepped into the circle first. Here, it said, 200 years ago, your people made their choice. They chose to embrace the wolf spirit, to become something greater. That's not how my grandmother told it, I said, the words coming from some deep place in my memory. She said they chose to keep both spirits in balance, that you were the one who wanted to throw that balance away. Sarah fell to her knees, gasping. The change was almost complete now, but in her eyes, her human eyes, I saw her fighting it. That's when I knew what I had to do. The lunar eclipse was starting. We could see the shadow creeping across the moon's face. The Alpha threw back its head and howled, a sound that made the ground shake. All around us, the pack joined in, their voices building into a sound that could drive you mad. Sarah's body convulsed. Fur rippled across her skin as the transformation took hold. Janet howled in triumph, but I was ready. I stepped into the center of the stone circle and began to sing. Not a howl. A song, the one my grandmother taught me when I was young. A song about balance, about choosing to be both and neither. With each word, I felt the wolf spirit in my blood rise up, trying to take over. I let it come, but I didn't fight it. I accepted. Dewey made peace with it, and then I offered it up, a sacrifice to save my daughter. The alpha's howl turned into a roar of rage. It lunged at me, but the old stones began to glow. The pack's unified howl broke apart into confused whimpers. I felt my body changing, but not like the others. Instead of becoming more wolf, I felt the wolf spirit leaving me, flowing out into the circle. The alpha stumbled, caught between forms. Not human, not wolf, but trapped in between. That's when the pack turned. Maybe they sensed weakness. Maybe the old stones reminded them of what they really were. But in moments, they fell upon the alpha, their former master. Sarah collapsed as the moon emerged from shadow. The fur receded from her skin. Janet fell beside her, slowly becoming human again. It was over, but not without a cost. These days, I can't speak human words after sunset. The sacrifice of my wolf spirit took that from me. But Sarah is alive and herself, mostly. Her eyes still glow a bit in the dark, and she can hear things nobody else can hear. The pack is back to normal now, hunting deer instead of people. Tom doesn't remember much about his time as a wolf, which is probably for the best. Janet and I talk more than we used to, bonded by what happened. Sometimes she stares at the moon, but the howling doesn't call to her anymore. Last week, Sarah found a wolf print outside her window. Just a normal one, from a normal wolf. She wasn't scared. She traced it with her finger and smiled. "We all have a choice," she said, remembering what I can no longer say after dark. "Every day we choose who we want to be." I nodded, watching the sunset. Soon I wouldn't be able to speak, but that was okay. Some sacrifices are worth making. And in the end, the wolf wasn't the most important spirit in my blood. The most important one was love. The ice inside my coffee mug didn't melt this morning, not a single drop. Even after sitting next to my cabin's fireplace for over an hour, those cubes stayed frozen solid, like tiny glaciers refusing to surrender to the heat. That should have been my first warning. My name is Marcus Thompson, and I've been a ranger at Mount Baker Snoqualmie National Forest for the past 2 years. Most folks would call me a loner, and they'd probably be right. After losing Sarah to tuberculosis, the quiet of these mountains became my only comfort. Well, that and her silver locket, which I always keep in my jacket pocket right above my heart. The forests up here in Washington state are different from the jungles I saw during the war. The Pacific Theater left scars that still wake me up. Some nights, but at least those memories involved heat and humidity. What I'm about to tell you is a different kind of horror. One that brings a cold that seeps into your bones and never leaves. This morning started like any other. I made my rounds, checking the usual spots where campers like to set up, making sure no one was breaking park rules or getting themselves into trouble. 20 years of military training taught me to notice things others might miss. Disturbed branches, unusual tracks, the way animals suddenly go quiet. These skills have saved more than a few lost hikers over the years. I remember standing at Eagle Point, my favorite lookout spot, watching the clouds roll in over the mountains. That's when I heard the radio crackle. Jerry, my supervisor down at the main station, rarely calls unless something's wrong. "Marcus, you there? We've got a situation. Family of 4 hasn't checked in. They were supposed to return from the North Trail 2 days ago." I felt my stomach tighten. The North Trail isn't particularly dangerous, not this time of year anyway. But something about this felt wrong. Maybe it was the way the wind had shifted, carrying a chill that didn't belong in early autumn. Or maybe it was how my coffee had stayed frozen solid that morning. "Copy that," I responded, already heading back to my truck. "Send me their last known coordinates." As I drove toward the trailhead, I caught myself touching Sarah's locket through my jacket. It's become a habit when things don't feel right. She always said I had good instincts, and right now, every one of them was screaming that this wasn't going to be a typical rescue mission. The clouds were getting thicker, darker than they should be. The temperature display in my truck showed pretty degrees, but my breath was coming out in visible puffs like it was middle of winter. That's when I noticed something else. The usual forest sounds had disappeared. No birds. No squirrels, nothing. I parked at the trailhead and grabbed my gear. First aid kit, emergency supplies, flares, and my trusted rifle. Years in the Pacific taught me never to go into unknown situations without protection. Though something in my gut told me bullets might not help with whatever was waiting up that trail, the first thing that hit me was the silence. Anyone who's spent time in forests knows they're never truly quiet. There's always something rustling, chirping or moving. But this was the kind of silence that follows after something terrible has happened. I found their campsite about 2 miles in. The tent was still there, perfectly intact. Sleeping bags were laid out. A camping stove sat ready to be lit. Everything looked normal, except for one detail that made my blood run cold. There was frost covering everything. A thick layer of ice crystals, even though the temperature was well above freezing. That's when I heard it. A sound that didn't belong in these mountains. A howl that seemed to echo from everywhere and nowhere at once. It wasn't a wolf, wasn't any animal I'd ever heard. It sounded almost human. Almost. I didn't know it then, but that moment marked the beginning of the longest winter of my life. A winter that would cost me more than just my arm, and teach me that some legends are better left buried in the ice. I spent 3 hours searching the area around that frozen campsite. The family's footprints led away from the tent, then suddenly stopped, like they'd vanished into thin air. What bothered me most was how their tracks looked scared. You can tell a lot from footprints, and these showed people running, stumbling, trying to get away from something. Back at my cabin that night, the radio wouldn't stop crackling. Static kept cutting in and out, and sometimes I swore I could hear voices in the white noise, whispers that made no sense. I tried calling Jerry at the main station, but all I got was more static. I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those empty sleeping bags covered in frost. Around midnight, the temperature outside dropped so low my windows frosted over, on the inside. That's when I heard the howling again. The next morning, Jerry's voice finally came through the radio, but I wished it hadn't. Another group had gone missing, this time from the east side of the mountain. 2 college students who'd gone hiking 3 days ago. That makes 5 people. 1 week, Marcus, Jerry said, his voice shaky. This isn't normal. I know, I replied, checking my rifle out of habit. I'm heading out to their last known location. The drive to the East Trail was worse than yesterday. The sky had turned a strange gray color, like dirty ice, and patches of frost covered the ground even though it was still early fall. My truck's thermometer read 45 degrees, but the frost shouldn't have been there at all. I found the students' backpacks first. They were torn open, with granola bars and trail mix scattered everywhere. But what made my hands shake was the ice, thick sheets of it coating their supplies. I picked up a water bottle, and the liquid inside was frozen solid, with strange patterns I'd never seen before, like somebody had frozen it from the inside out. That's when I spotted the journal. It was half buried under some leaves, its pages stiff with frost. It belonged to one of the college students, a girl named Amy. The last entry made my heart stop. There's something wrong with the shadows here. They move when they shouldn't. White shapes that follow us through the trees. Mark says I'm imagining things, but I know what I saw. It's getting colder, so much colder. The shadows are getting closer. They whisper things we can't understand. We need to run. We need to... The entry stopped mid-sentence. The rest of the page was covered in frantic scribbles and one word written over and over. Cold. I was putting the journal in my pack when my radio suddenly came to life. Through the static, I heard a voice. A young woman's voice. Help. Please. We're so cold. It sounded like it was coming from just up the trail. I grabbed my gear and started walking, trying to ignore how the temperature seemed to drop with each step. The voice came again, closer this time. Please. Anyone. Help us. But something wasn't right. The voice sounded wrong, like an echo in a frozen cave. I've been on enough rescue missions to know how people sound when they're really calling for help. This was different. This was like someone, or something, trying to sound human. I stopped walking. The voice called again, but this time I noticed something that made my blood run cold. The words were the same, but they were playing backward. A branch snapped behind me. I spun around, rifle ready, but there was nothing there. Just shadows between the trees. But these shadows, they weren't right. They were too pale, almost white, and they seemed to move even though there was no wind. That's when I remembered something Sarah had told me once. Her grandmother was Native American, from one of the local tribes. She used to tell Sarah stories about the mountains, about things that lived in the deepest parts of the forest, things that hunted by imitating voices, things that brought unnatural cold. I'd always thought they were just stories. The radio crackled again. This time I heard multiple voices overlapping, some speaking words I didn't understand, others calling out in English, all of them sounding desperate, afraid, and wrong. I started walking back to my truck, trying to move quietly, but every step crunched on frost that shouldn't have been there. The voices from the radio got louder, more distorted. The shadows between the trees seemed to stretch, reaching out like pale fingers. Just before I reached my truck, I saw something that made me freeze. In the frost covering my windshield, someone, or something, had written words. The letters were carved deep into the ice, but from the inside of the glass. The hunger wakes. I needed help. It was time to talk to someone who might know what was really happening in these mountains. Someone who might understand what those old stories really meant. Because now I was sure of one thing. What was hunting in my forest wasn't human. And those missing people, they were just the beginning. The next morning, I drove down to the small town at the base of the mountain. There was an elder from the local tribe, Joseph Running Bear, who owned the general store. If anyone knew about strange things happening in the forest, it would be him. The store was empty when I walked in, just the soft ding of the bell above the door. Joseph was behind the counter, organizing fishing lures. He took one look at my face and stopped. What he was doing. "You've seen something in the mountains," he said. It wasn't a question. I pulled out Amy's journal and placed it on the counter. 7 people missing in 2 weeks, strange ice formations, white shadows, and this. I pointed to the message on my truck's windshield, which I'd taken a photo of with my phone. Joseph's hands trembled slightly as he looked at the picture. "The hunger wakes," he whispered. "My grandfather warned us this might happen again." Again? My mouth went dry. "This has happened before?" He nodded slowly, then walked to the door and turned the open sign to closed. "Sit," he said, pulling up 2 chairs. "There are things you need to know." As Joseph talked, the temperature in the store seemed to drop. He told me about the winter of 1923, when 12 people vanished in the same part of the forest. How they found the bodies weeks later, frozen solid even though it was spring. Some of the bodies, they didn't look quite human anymore. "Our people have always known about the Wendigo," he said, "a spirit of winter and hunger. It sleeps for decades, sometimes centuries. But when it wakes," he shook his head, "it feeds not just on flesh, but on desperation, on loneliness, on fear." I thought about those voices on the radio calling for help, about the footprints that started human but changed into something else. "How do we stop it?" I asked. Joseph's eyes met mine. "You don't understand. It's already started. The spirit, it doesn't just kill. It changes people, makes them like itself. Each victim makes it stronger." My hands went to Sarah's locket in my pocket. "There must be something we can do." "There are stories," Joseph said carefully. "Old stories about warriors who fought the spirit. Not many survived, but those who did, they used silver and fire. The spirit hates both." I was about to ask more when my radio crackled to life. Jerry's voice came through, panicked. "Marcus, we've got another missing group, 3 hikers. But this time we found something. You need to see this." 20 minutes later, I was back up the mountain, pulling up to a new campsite. The scene was worse than anything I'd seen in the war. The tent was shredded, but not from the outside. The tears went from inside out like something had burst through it. There was blood in the snow, Snow, even though it was still 40 degrees. But it was frozen in weird patterns like it had crystallized instantly. And the bodies, we found 2 of them. They were frozen solid, faces twisted in terror. But the worst part was the bite marks. They weren't from any animal I knew, and some of them looked human but wrong, like the jaws that made them were stretched too wide. The 3rd hiker's still missing, Jerry said, his face pale. We found tracks leading into the woods, but Marcus, he pointed at the ground. I saw what he meant. The footprints started normal, regular boot prints in the frost. But as they went on, they changed, got longer. The toe marks stretched out, became more like claws. The last few prints barely looked human at all. That's when we heard it. A scream, from deep in the forest. But it wasn't just a scream. It was like a dozen voices screaming at once, some human, some not. Jerry reached for his radio to call for backup, but I stopped him. Don't, I said. More people will just mean more victims. Then, what do we do? I touched Sarah's silver locket again, remembering Joseph's words about silver and fire. I'm going after it. Alone. You can't be serious, Jerry said. Whatever did this isn't natural, I finished. I know, but I've got an idea. I went back to my truck and grabbed some supplies, road flares, my rifle, and a length of rope. Then I took off Sarah's locket and wrapped it around my hand. If I'm not back by dark, I told Jerry, seal off this whole area. Don't let anyone else in. And Jerry? I looked him in the eye. If you hear voices calling for help, even if they sound like me, don't answer. As I started following the transformed footprints into the woods, the temperature dropped another 10 degrees. The trees seemed to lean in, their shadows stretching white against the frost-covered ground. My breath came out in clouds that froze and shattered in the air. The radio at my belt started whispering again, this time in voices I recognized, the missing hikers, the college students, even Sarah's voice. But I knew better now. These weren't really their voices. They were bait in a trap. Something moved between the trees ahead of me. Something tall and white, like living ice. It was time to face what was hunting in my forest. But as I gripped the silver locket tighter, I realized I wasn't just trying to save the missing people anymore. I was trying to save whatever was still human in them. The thing in the trees moved again, closer this time. The air turned so cold it hurt to breathe, and somewhere in the distance I heard more screams, the sound of another person changing, becoming something else. I had to hurry, before there was nothing left to save. I wasn't alone in the forest for long. About half a mile in, I heard footsteps crunching on frozen leaves behind me. I spun around, rifle ready, only to find Mike Chen, another ranger who'd joined the service last month. He was younger than me, maybe 30, carrying his own rifle and a backpack. Jerry radioed me, he said, breathing hard. Said you were going after whatever's taking people. Thought you could use backup. I wanted to tell him to go back. That this wasn't something 2 rangers with rifles could handle. But the truth was, having another person there made the forest feel a little less empty, a little less wrong. Stay close, I told him. And whatever happens, don't trust anything you hear. We followed the twisted footprints deeper into the woods. The trees got thicker, blocking out most of the daylight. Ice covered everything now. The branches, the ground, even spider webs that looked like frozen lace between the trees. Marcus, Mike whispered, pointing ahead. Look, about 50 feet away, something moved in the shadows. It was tall, much taller than any person should be. Its skin was pale white, almost see-through like ice, and I could see dark shapes moving inside it like frozen organs. The creature's arms hung down past its knees, ending in long fingers that looked sharp as icicles. But its face, I'll never forget its face. It was stretched too long, with black holes where eyes should be, and a mouth full of teeth like broken glass. When it breathed, the air around it turned to swirling snow. Mike raised his rifle, but I pushed it down. Wait, I whispered. The creature hadn't seen us yet. It was bent over something in the snow, a deer, frozen solid and half-eaten. That's when I noticed something even stranger. The creature's skin wasn't just see-through. It was like looking into deep ice. And inside I could see shapes that looked like people, their faces frozen in screams. The radio at my belt suddenly crackled. A voice came through. A woman's voice. I recognized from the missing hiker's photos. "Please, so cold. Help me." The creature's head snapped up. Those black eye holes turned right toward us. "Run!" I shouted, grabbing Mike's arm. We sprinted through the trees as the temperature plunged. My breath froze in my lungs, and frost started forming on my clothes. Behind us, the creature moved, with horrible speed, its long limbs carrying it over the frozen ground like a spider. "This way!" Mike pointed to a narrow gap between two rocks. We squeezed through just as the creature reached for us, its icy fingers scraping the stone. We found ourselves in a small cave. The entrance was too narrow for the creature to follow, but the cold poured in like water. I pulled out a road flare and lit it. The red light filled the cave, and for a moment the cold seemed to back away. Outside, the creature prowled back and forth. But now it wasn't just screaming. It was talking, using the voices of everyone it had taken. "Marcus, help us. So hungry. Join us." Some of the voices were speaking that strange language I'd heard on the radio. Mike pressed his hands over his ears, shaking. "Don't listen," I told him. "It's trying to get in our heads." But Mike's eyes had gone strange, wide and glassy. His breath was coming out in clouds that looked almost solid. "I can hear them," he whispered. "They're so cold, so hungry." I grabbed his shoulders. "Mike, look at me. It's not real." But something was, happening to him. His skin was turning pale, almost translucent. I could see the veins underneath turning black with ice. When he opened his mouth, his teeth looked sharper. So, hungry. His voice didn't sound human anymore. I backed away, holding up the flare. Between us, Mike screamed, a sound no human throat could make, and lunged at me. His fingers had grown longer, sharper, like the creatures outside. The fight was quick and desperate. Mike was stronger now, his hands ice cold where they grabbed me. But the flare seemed to hurt him. When the red light touched his skin, it sizzled, like burning ice. I remembered Joseph's words about silver and fire. With my free hand, I pulled out Sarah's locket and pressed it against Mike's chest. He screamed again, recoiling as the silver left a smoking mark on his freezing skin. "I'm sorry," I whispered and pushed him back toward the cave entrance. The creature was waiting. As soon as Mike stumbled out, its long arms grabbed him. I watched in horror as it pulled him into its ice-clear body, adding him to the frozen faces. Trapped inside, I used the moment to run deeper into the cave, following a narrow tunnel I hoped led somewhere else. Behind me, I heard the creature howling, not just with its own voice, but with Mike's too. The tunnel went down, then up, twisting through the mountain. I had to crawl in some places, my hands and knees going numb from the frozen ground. The flare was burning low, and I only had 2 more in my pack. Finally, I saw light ahead, another way out. But when I reached it, I almost wished I hadn't. The tunnel opened into a huge ice cave, and what I saw there told me this was so much worse than I'd imagined. The cave walls were filled with bodies. Hundreds of them, frozen in the ice like insects in amber. Some looked decades old, wearing clothes from the 1920s or earlier. Others were newer, including the missing hikers from the past 2 weeks. And some of the bodies, they were half changed, caught between human and whatever that creature was trying to make them become. Their faces were stretched, their limbs too long, their skin turning to ice. The creature hadn't just been hunting here for weeks. It had been hunting here for centuries. I heard movement behind me, the sound of long limbs scraping against ice. The creature had followed me through the tunnels, and now, in this cave of its victims, I would have to face it. With a shaking hand, I lit my second-to-last flare. The red light reflected off the ice walls, lighting up hundreds of frozen faces. Somewhere in the shadows, something moved, and I realized I wasn't just fighting for my life anymore. I was fighting for every person trapped in that ice, including Mike. The creature stepped into the light. Up close, it was even more horrible than before. And now I could see every one of its victims floating inside it, their faces pressed against, its icy skin like they were trying to get out. The final battle was about to begin, and I only had two things on my side: a dying flare and a silver locket that once belonged to the woman I loved. I hoped it would be enough. The creature moved, like flowing water, its long arms reaching for me across the ice cave. I rolled behind a frozen column, my hands shaking as I gripped the flare. The red light made shadows dance on the walls, turning the frozen faces in the ice into twisted masks. Then I heard Mike's voice again, but different now, like someone talking through broken glass. "Mark, it doesn't hurt anymore. The cold, it feels good." I peeked around the column. Mike's body was pushing its way out of the creature's chest, like he was being born again. But he wasn't Mike anymore. His skin was almost clear now, his fingers long and sharp like icicles. Only his eyes still looked human, and they were filled with pain. "You can join us," he said, reaching out one frozen hand. "No more loneliness, no more pain, just the hunger." For a second, I almost understood. The cold didn't look so bad anymore. Maybe it would be peaceful, becoming part of something bigger, something ancient. Then I felt Sarah's locket pulse warm against my chest, and the spell broke. I saw what was really happening. My friend was turning into a monster, and soon there'd be nothing left of him at all. "Mike," I said, stepping out from behind the column, "remember who you are. Remember your family. Your little girl, Emma. She's waiting for you to come home." Something flickered in those human eyes. For just a moment, Mike's face looked normal again. He grabbed his head like he was in pain. "Emma," he whispered. Then he screamed, a sound that shook icicles from the ceiling. "Marcus, God, kill me, please, before I... The creature roared, trying to pull Mike back into itself. But he fought against it, his body half in, half out, like he was trapped between two worlds. "The silver," he gasped. "Use the silver. And the fire. Do it now." My hands moved before my brain could catch up. I wrapped Sarah's locket around my fist and lit my last flare with the other hand. Mike's eyes met mine one last time, and I saw him, the real him, smile. "Thank you," he whispered. I lunged forward, pressing the silver locket against his chest while holding the flare against the creature's ice skin. The cave filled with a sound like breaking glass. Steam hissed where the silver touched Mike. The creature's body started to crack like an ice pond in spring. Mike's body began to crumble, turning to snow and frost. But his face was human again at the end. Peaceful. The creature howled, a sound of loss and hunger that shook the whole cave. I stumbled backward, watching as Mike's remains scattered like winter dust. The creature's body was healing itself. Ice, flowing like water to fill the cracks. But now I knew its weakness. Silver and fire together could hurt it, could free its victims, but I also knew something else. A horrible truth I saw in Mike's last moments. The people trapped inside the creature weren't just dead. Part of them was still aware, still suffering. Every face in the ice around me belonged to someone who was frozen but conscious, hungry but unable to do anything about it. Hundreds of people. Decades of victims. All of them awake. The creature gathered itself, rising to its full height. It looked bigger now, stronger, angry. The faces inside its body pressed against its skin, mouths open in silent screams. I looked at my last flare, already burning low, at the silver locket that had saved me from the creature's voice. They wouldn't be enough to kill it, not even close. But maybe they didn't have to be. I remembered something from my time in the war. How sometimes you can't win a fight, but you can change the battlefield. Make the enemy fight where you want them to fight. I looked up at the cave ceiling, at the thick icicles hanging there like spears, at the narrow tunnel I'd come through, barely wide enough for a person. Then at the creature's massive body, which had to flow like water to move through small spaces. A plan started forming in my mind. A crazy, desperate plan that would probably get me killed. But Mike's sacrifice had shown me something important. We couldn't kill this thing, not really. But maybe we could trap it, seal it away somewhere it couldn't hurt anyone else. I gripped the flare tighter and touched the locket for luck. "Sarah," I whispered, "I might be seeing you sooner than I thought." Then I turned and ran deeper into the cave, hoping the creature would follow, hoping my plan would work, hoping I could end this nightmare before anyone else ended up like Mike. Behind me, the creature howled, a sound of hunger and rage that echoed through the ice tunnels. The hunt was on, but this time, I was leading it exactly where I wanted it to go. The deeper tunnels were like a frozen maze. My flare was burning lower, casting weird shadows on the ice walls. Every few steps, I'd pass another frozen face in the ice. Men, women, children, all caught in the moment the creature took them. Then I saw something that made me stop. In one of the walls was an old leather bag, the kind rangers used to carry back in the 1920s. Next to it was a frozen body wearing a ranger's uniform from the same time. His hand was stretched out, holding something that looked like a journal. I had to know. Using the flare, I melted just enough ice to pull the journal free. Its pages were stiff with frost, but I could still read the writing. October 15th, 1923. The thing in the mountain is getting stronger. 3 more missing today. Silver seems to hurt it, but not enough. Roberts tried dynamite yesterday. The explosion trapped it for a while, but the ice is part of it somehow. It uses the caves like they're its body. We found the old tribal cave paintings today. They show the creature has been here for centuries. It sleeps for decades, then wakes up hungry. The tribes used to work together to trap it deep in the mountain when it woke. But now people have forgotten. They don't believe the old stories anymore. If anyone finds this, the creature can't be killed, but it can be trapped. The tribes knew how. Silver and fire weaken it, but the real key is the ice itself. If you can turn its own power against it. The rest of the page was torn away. But now I understood why my plan might work. The creature wasn't just in the ice, it was part of the ice. The whole cave system was like its body, and bodies can be trapped. I heard the creature coming before I saw it. The temperature dropped so fast my flare almost went out. Ice started creeping up the walls like living frost. But now I noticed something new. Everywhere the creature moved, the ice in the walls seemed to pulse, like a heartbeat. The faces trapped inside turned to follow it, like flowers following the sun. This wasn't just its lair, it was its nest, its home. That's when I spotted the paintings the old ranger's journal mentioned. They were on the ceiling, hidden under layers of frost. Ancient red handprints and drawings showing the same story over and over. A tall white figure being led, deeper and deeper into a mountain, then sealed away with fire and silver. The creature burst into the chamber, its body filling the tunnel behind it. The faces inside it pressed against its skin, hundreds of mouths moving with its voice. Nowhere left to run. But I wasn't running anymore. I was exactly where I needed to be. This chamber was different from the others. The walls were curved in a special way, leading to a narrow point like a funnel. And above us, the ceiling was covered in huge icicles, like nature's own spears. I held up Sarah's locket, letting it catch the flare's light. "You're right," I said. "No more running." The creature moved forward, its long arms reaching for me. It thought it had me trapped. But for the first time since this nightmare began, I smiled. Because I knew something it didn't. Something the tribes had known centuries ago. Sometimes the best trap isn't the strongest one. It's the one your enemy walks into willingly. I gripped my last flare tighter, feeling its heat against my palm. The creature was almost on me now. Everything would depend on the next few seconds. "Sarah," I whispered, "help me make this count." I threw the flare straight up at the ceiling. For a second, everything went dark. The creature lunged forward, thinking I had made a mistake. That's exactly what I wanted it to think. The flare hit one of the massive icicles and exploded in a burst of red light. Heat spread through the ice, making it crack. The creature realized too late what was happening. Huge icicles, sharp as spears and heavy as trees, started falling. The first one caught the creature in its shoulder, pinning it to the ground. It screamed with 100 voices at once, thrashing like a trapped animal. More icicles fell, each one driving it further down. But I wasn't done. I pulled out the bundle of dynamite I'd been saving. The same kind the ranger from 1923 had tried to use. The creature's black eyes widened as it recognized the threat. "This cave is your body?" I said, lighting the fuse with a dying flare. "Then let's see how you like having part of it blown up." I threw the dynamite at the chamber's far wall and ran for the narrow tunnel I'd spotted earlier. Behind me, the creature roared, its long arms reaching for me even as it stayed pinned by the icicles. The explosion shook the whole mountain. I dove into the tunnel just as the blast hit. Heat and ice washed over me like a wave. The creature's scream was cut off by the sound of tons of ice and rock collapsing. Then everything went quiet. Too quiet. I tried to stand up, but something was wrong. My left arm wouldn't move. When I looked down, I saw why. It was frozen solid from the shoulder, down, covered in the creature's ice. The pain hit me then, worse than anything I'd ever felt, but I couldn't stop. The creature might be trapped, but it wasn't finished. I could still hear it moving in the darkness beyond the cave-in, trying to reform itself. I broke off most of my frozen arm against a rock. The pain made me black out for a second, but Sarah's locket pulsed warm against my chest, keeping me awake. I had one last thing to do. Crawling forward, I found what I was looking for, a crack in the ice where the cave walls met. The tribe's paintings had shown this too. The creature could be sealed away, but only with the right key. I pulled off Sarah's locket with my good hand. The silver felt warm despite the freezing air. Behind the wall of fallen ice, I heard the creature moving closer, its body flowing through cracks too small for a human. "I'm sorry, Sarah," I whispered and jammed the locket into the crack. The effect was instant. Silver light spread through the ice like lightning through water. The creature shrieked as the light touched it, its body starting to freeze in a different, turning solid, unmovable. The cold grew more intense. Ice crystals formed in the air itself. The creature tried one last time to reach me, a single long arm shooting through a gap in the fallen ice. But as it touched me, it froze solid. The silver light from the locket grew brighter, spreading through all the ice in the cave. I saw the creature's body becoming part of the cave walls, merging with the ice until I couldn't tell where it ended, and the mountain began. The last thing I saw before I passed out was the creature's face, full of all those trapped souls freezing into the wall like a horrible window. Their mouths were open in a silent scream that would echo in my nightmares forever. Then everything went white, and the cold took me. I woke up 3 days later in a hospital bed. The rescue team had found me at the cave entrance, half frozen, but alive. They said it was a miracle I survived. The doctors couldn't save my left arm, it had been too badly frozen. But considering what happened to everyone else, I got lucky. The official report said there was a cave-in after I used dynamite to clear a blocked tunnel. They blamed the missing people on avalanches and exposure. Nobody wanted to believe what really happened. Nobody except Joseph Running Bear. He visited me in the hospital looking at my missing arm with sad, knowing eyes. "The silver locket," he said. "It worked?" I nodded. "It's still there in the ice, keeping it trapped." "Good." He placed a small wooden box on my bedside table. "Then it's time you had this." Inside the box was another silver locket, older than Sarah's. "My grandfather's grandfather helped trap it the last time," Joseph said. "This was his, in case it ever wakes up again." I turned in my ranger badge after that, told them I couldn't do the job with one arm. But the truth was, I couldn't go back to those mountains. Not after what I saw in that ice. I moved to Arizona, somewhere warm where ice never forms. But I keep Joseph's silver locket with me always, because sometimes on cold nights, I dream about what's frozen in that mountain cave. I dream about Mike and all the others trapped in the ice. I dream about Their faces still aware, still hungry. And I wonder, how long will Sarah's locket hold? How long before the ice starts to melt? I'm writing this down now because people need to know the truth, need to be ready. Because the winter hunger spirit isn't dead, it's just sleeping. And someday, maybe years from now, maybe centuries, someone will hear strange voices in the mount. Baker Snoqualmie Forest. They'll see white shadows moving between the trees. They'll feel a cold that freezes from the inside out. When that happens, they'll need to know what to do. About the silver and the fire. About the ice caves and the ancient tribal paintings. About the sacrifices made to keep it trapped. So if you're reading this and you feel an unnatural cold, if you hear voices calling for help that sound almost human, if you see something tall and white moving through the trees, run as fast as you can, and whatever you do, don't answer when it calls your name, because winter is always hungry, and some things are better left frozen in the dark.